Evening.
Evening. How are we doing?
Busy. The good sort of busy with life and um oh, in some senses wishing I could do more at work because it feels productive and useful and appreciated, but also
Mm,
sort of glad of the uh restraint of needing to be home to care for child so that I don't just pour all of myself into that.
yeah, you can't sacrifice everything else for it. It's good to have those restraints.
Hmm. Though it's
I think it's a
still
good part of being an adult is when you realize that you can't just sacrifice the rest of everything in your life for whatever thing captures your attention at that moment. You always have to balance things. Stop people going off the deep end, I think.
hmm. And I do tend towards slightly obsessive focus on the interest of the moment.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. Hence all your hobbies.
Yes, and the temptations to pick up new ones, like looking up barn door equatorial mounts, which are basically a hand screw driven mount for a camera so that you can get astrophotography long exposures on the cheap.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, but yeah, another
So I think
thing
it's
to
funny that.
add. Oh, you go.
No, you go. You go.
Oh, just another thing to add to the pile of hobbies. I'm just looking over at the corner of the room, and it's like there's the box full of camping stuff. There's the box of miscellaneous wires and chemicals like meths and terps and kerosene and things like that for the for the antique blowtorch I picked up somewhere. There's the big copper loop of an antenna. The other antennas behind me there, and there's a couple of skeletons of antenna tuners that I picked up, one of which is in useful condition, and they're sitting on the box of candle making equipment and in front of the guitar.
All I can think of is the thing you said before. You're winning at your game.
Yeah. So I thought I had recently that I was commenting about in the pre-show, you could say. Um, a thought that had occurred to me of I'm winning at my game, which was a very interesting one because um, oh, it lines in with the ongoing work of seeking my own value in an effort to make myself attractive to the opposite sex and hopefully attract said interest sooner rather than later, but can't really work on that, just keep working forwards. But yeah, that I'm not, lots of money is not on my success criteria. Sort of ability to do lots of things is. And it's like looking on my other side, there's an oscilloscope that I picked up and a lot of books on lots of things. Like there's the DIY section, there's a ham radio section, there's the philosophy section, there's on death and dying, the metaphysics of death, there's the Buddhism section and the Tibetan Book of the Dead that I found somewhere. There's a textbook of mechanical engineering, a nice thick old one, and I've been able to take quite a few things that I've collected over the years into work as useful things. Like I had a book that I picked up, I think it was from a university library book sale, The Destructive Distillation of Wood, which basically means you heat it up in a closed environment with no oxygen and lots of chemicals come off. Useful chemicals like acetone and acetic acid and um, tar and creosote and all sorts of things that were the foundation of industrial chemistry before oil. And we want the steam engine technology to be usable off the grid. And I'm not just talking like, oh, you've got an off grid house, that's cute. I'm talking you're a month's travel from spare parts off the grid and like, oh, how are we going to treat the water to keep the stuff in the water in the boiler with the right chemistry. And well, you can produce sodium hydroxide by electrolysis of salty water done the right way. And it's like, oh, okay, good. We'll have to set, once we get to the point of having an off-grid line of products, we'll have to have something to produce sodium hydroxide from the steam engine so that you're independent. And the book that I had was published in 1923. It's a 100-year-old book, sort of summing up the industrial knowledge of destructive distillation of wood, and it's potentially useful in a real application. And it's like the oh yeah, and I'm stable in a whole bunch of ways, and just that thought of I'm winning at my game. It's like, what's my game is the first question you have to answer there, and so I'm not 100% sure of it, but it feels like I'm winning it for some reason. And like
It's, I'd
thoughts aren't
say you are
voluntary.
pretty strongly on that.
Yeah, and I just need to find someone who has similar criteria for success at the game of life to me. Someone who holds similar enough values to appreciate the value of thriftiness, which I have thought about it, and it's not just a drive to deprive myself in an effort um, to achieve some value for the wider world or to make up for my sins of existence. It's I don't derive joy from spending. It's like I derive joy from usefulness of items and myself. And the
People don't derive joy from spending. They derive joy from the things that they acquire or the experiences they have.
hmm,
If someone goes and spends money on a nice dinner, they're not doing it because they enjoy throwing your money away. They do it because they enjoy having a nice dinner out for the experience.
hmm. There was a last week I think that was the one where I brought up the idea of becoming strong enough to endure probable future hardships. And I had a thought going on from that, given your response to it, that to become that person means losing something else. But there's also the I don't know what the future holds, and as I am now, I'm not ready for it. But I know that that who I am can adapt to whatever said future happens to be and work with it.
Mm, yes.
So it's not that I am hard enough to endure hardship. It's that I am soft now because my situation doesn't demand hardness, but I could become hard.
You've found the part of you that has the ability, but you won't lose. You won't be scarred by the necessary transformation until it is necessary. I think it's important to note on you when playing the game, winning the game that you're playing, especially when you keep talking about, trying to find your partner, your ideal partner. You are winning the game that you're playing. The game that you're playing is I'm hard pressed to say anything other than starving artist, but it's a trope.
Hmm.
It's you could call it an archetype, I suppose. What you're looking for in a partner is someone to see your uniqueness, your intelligence, and your creative force and value that. Someone who would take that as a preferential to simply acquired resource, which, by the way, is actually most women. The general proclivity for women is to be attracted to the things that generate resources, not that have. And the ones that attract to that which have are not ones you want to attract.
Hmm.
But people often misunderstand that about women.
Yeah, because I think
You're
that
doing very well on that. Like, you've got everything nailed out. I'm honestly surprised that you haven't found someone yet.
my
No, I'm
social
serious.
ineptitude comes into that, and lack of numbers to filter out for the right
I think
one.
lack of exposure.
Yeah.
You need a university level literature club or something like that. You need a group that selects out people who I'm gonna not use mean words. Selects out base women. No, based isn't the right word. You want one of those. What am I thinking of here? Hmm. I'm lost for words. Anyway, you
Those
want to
who
find a
seek
group
what I
of
don't
people.
have.
Well, you have it, but you don't want. Yeah, I'm trying to find a really nice way other than saying that you don't want a basic bitch. You don't want some gold digger. You don't want some stupid girl who's flashing herself all over the place.
Hmm.
You want an actual woman, and in order for her to see the value in you, she has to have some amount of intelligence or wisdom.
Hmm.
Because I don't think that the creative, particularly the eccentric, intelligent types, which I think both of us would fall into, are attractive to stupid women because they don't see the value in it, or yeah, it's hard to see something as valuable when you can't comprehend it. I know some attraction is innate, and perhaps there's a sentence of that, but you yourself also, I don't think, could stand being with someone who was stupid. But don't
Yeah.
put your sights too high on the intelligent front, because I think you're well aware that you're in single digit percentage of the population for intelligence.
That sounds so arrogant.
Well, it's it's funny that you say that. I was actually asking my wife last night or the other night about whatever my faults are. I do this quite often. And the answer I got back was, there's nothing wrong with you except for the fact that you think there's something wrong with you. Stop asking about your faults. And I asked her, like, you want me to be more arrogant? And she said, yes.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Which I thought was quite funny because I've been trying really hard for a long time to be humble and not arrogant. And now she's like, no, you need to be more arrogant. Hmm. Yeah, you are in the very high percentile for intelligence. And if you're trying to find a woman who is equally as intelligent as you, um, it's going to be hard, particularly in your situation. I don't think that needs to be your be all end all criteria. Reality first, probably. Obviously, you want some form of attraction, someone who meshes with you in terms of situation in life and be
Yeah.
willing to step into your life. I
Yeah.
also think it's worth noting that the whole thing about you wanting to find a person who agrees with your philosophy on life, I don't actually think you should make that a criteria. Because I don't know if you've met people like this, but when you meet a couple I think of my grandparents as the perfect example for this, where both of them have the same opinion on everything. They're not healthy people. There needs to be a dynamic at play. You know, you have your frugal attitude, your off-grid thinking. You have this perspective, which is good. But I think if you had a more normal partner who was able to go, okay, that's good for these reasons, but you know, we also need to do something nice every now and then.
Hmm.
I'm just using that one as an example. Of course, it applies to everything, but
Yeah. I
it needs to be a
guess,
balance.
yeah, yeah, I can definitely see that. And to think of the dynamics of a couple, it's like if they are, if the relationship dynamics are self-reinforcing in whatever directions they're already going, then that can that dynamic can carry itself out a long way. Whereas if you have them close enough to see the value in where they each are, even if they're each gently pulling in opposite directions or
Mm.
alternate directions. It's like, I prefer this, but I see the value in that, but I do prefer this.
Yeah,
Um,
that state of steady stress helps development. The positive feedback loop going in a single direction creates a persona that is a mockery of itself.
hmm,
I think of when you think of a celebrity who impersonates themselves, that's what I think of when I think of a marriage or a partnership where both people agree on everything.
hmm.
Not only do they become clones, but they also become more and more ridiculous down their ideological path.
Because we outsource our sanity to the people we spend the most time with, and if it's all self-reinforcing, then the the
Yeah, there's no check and balance. It's
mm,
and I don't think things like that stay together generally,
mm,
unless one submits to the other, in which case you just have a tyranny and slave situation, which is also not ideal.
mm. There was another thought I had about the path I've taken to get to where I am now. And you remember how you commented about how quickly I'd managed to integrate's too strong a word, but accept the existence of and work towards integration of that potential for unconstrained violence that I found internally.
Mm,
It's it's certainly a minor personality aspect, but it's acknowledging the existence and potential value of that aspect. Um, but it's not just, oh, I found it and then I accepted it and worked to integrate it like that. I look back and I'm probably on a decade now of active effort, maybe too strong a word, but active self-direction towards movement in whatever direction is better, like aiming up, right? And wanting to see my faults and learn the lessons that experiences have to teach. And it's like that was something that was a bit of a focus during the hard times with my ex when I thought I could make it work. It was help me learn the lessons I need to learn and move forward. Like the imagery of the phoenix rising from the ashes, or the being the thing that changes rather than being the self perceptions. And I'm also being probably toward the more open minded, yeah, the openness end of the spectrum. My sense of self has always been a bit tricky to define, and I can imagine that for someone who identifies themselves as a particular political allegiance and a particular job and having particular products and so on, to the thought of losing those things or at least from the descriptions I've read, the thought of losing those things that you choose to identify as yourself triggers, in a very real sense, fear of death. Because it's like, I am this. Idea of
It's
this going away. It's like idea of self vanishing.
well, you got to understand that. That's it's a fear of chaos.
Mm.
It makes sense to me naturally that some people would be more sensitive to chaos and some people not, which I think is probably conservative side of things, the less open, more industrious type of people where have an aversion to chaos. They have a real sensitivity to, hey, we're getting a little too fast and loose with the rules there. Things can go off the off the rails and things can get dangerous.
Mm.
And I think the liberals, at least temperamentally, um, which funnily enough is actually where I line up, have a real sensitivity to structure and tyranny. It's that balance, pull back and forth. I wonder, I've been wondering about this in terms of people who are high openness and high conscientiousness, if they have both sensitivities.
Mm. Yeah, because I
I,
was just thinking that I'm sensitive to chaos, which is why I've worked hard to master the chaos in my life, if that makes sense. And you look around my house and it is rather chaotic, but I know where things are, and there's half a dozen projects in various states of deconstruction or construction, and various states of, I broke that, need to fix it sometime, and wrote a to-do list
I,
and covered 2 journal pages. But,
I don't, I have a
hmm,
hard time agreeing with that statement,
mm,
actually. The idea of you being sensitive to chaos, that strikes me as opposite of reality.
mm,
You seem to me as a person who revels in the unknown and is always exploring the chaos.
hmm,
When I think of someone who is scared of chaos, I think of someone who hates new things. Like you were saying, the person who is, I am, you know, I am a conservative and I work at this factory and I drink this beer and I eat this food and I drive this brand of car and I'm never going to do anything else. And the idea of changing any one of those things terrifies them.
hmm.
That's what I think of someone who is afraid of chaos.
Yeah, I guess I
Whereas you
was,
you go after it.
yeah, I guess I was thinking of the fear of the dragons that lie within the chaos.
Uh,
So that's not the fear of chaos
it's
itself. Like I can
mm,
remember for a more visceral experience, it's like going sailing and like the waves in the water and the wind are absolutely chaotic entities. They're sort of bounded in the sense of the wind's not going to suddenly turn into something else, but it's a it's like riding a unicycle. There's constant balance and against like the wind changes, the wave hits you, that changes the angle of the boat. So it's like surfing. It's constant riding of it to keep on the edge that is balance, and then you power it up. And like the fastest point was always on the edge of disaster, I used to say, and look forward to doing more sailing when I have the time. But everything's powered up to the max, and you're screaming along, and if one thing goes wrong, you crash. And that was after a day of doing that for several hours and having a bunch of crashes and getting up again, you come back in and you feel like you're floating from the adrenaline. It's just like slightly giddy and your hands are blue or purple from the cold, and you go into the shower and it burns because your body's chilled on the outside. But that experience of here's something to to battle, I guess. And I can see what you mean about the what you were talking about going out into the chaos and reveling in it. It made me think of how I've loved finding the cracks in the conventional ways of seeing things, or
Mm.
yeah, the that's interesting. Let me dig into it and work out what's on the other side. What's on the other side of the looking glass to like Alice in
I
Wonderland.
guess that I guess that makes sense why I like doing that with people. That must be something to do with that openness and that wanting to explore chaos
Hmm.
to the point where I seem to rather enjoy taking stances or making statements on things that not just that other people disagree with, but like a thing that no one else had ever heard someone actually say before.
Hmm.
I wonder why I have that proclivity. I was thinking earlier, I was talking with my wife actually about we talked a while ago about your single parent support thing.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, well, I'm not in favor of this, but you know, you're an example of a person that I care about who is benefiting it from it, and taking that away would hurt them, and this or this reason. And for a long time, I've had my actual policy beliefs on things been tempered with well, okay, that would work great, but I need to be concerned about the effects that it has on the people during, say, the transition or whatever transitional period.
Hmm.
But I think back on those times when I've said things at dinners and gotten the shock out of people that I've reveled in, that I've loved. It was when I had no concern for the the feelings of others. That doesn't sound right. Not being concerned about a person being offended at a statement or a thing that I hold to be true.
Hmm.
Like I talked to my wife about, I actually did this to people. I used to do this a lot. I talked about the list of policies I would enact if I was in charge of the nation. And I used to get a lot of shocks from people when I do that, which I rather enjoyed. I want to know why I have the proclivity to want to say things that are edgy, for lack of a better term, that I do believe, but that are, what, outside the Overton window, unacceptable to our culture.
Where does that term come from? Overton window. I've heard it a bunch as like the realm of acceptable discourse, I guess. But
Yeah, there are, you imagine a massive map, a massive field of potential political philosophies and um, not acceptable, potential political philosophies. Um, yeah, we'll limit it just to the political,
hmm.
although this applies to any intellectual endeavor, I suppose. You have the entire field of potential thoughts and opinions on the topic, on the political for this one. And it's, probably almost infinite. And then you have this tiny little square, which, say rectangle, which is the things that are acceptable to be stated. So you think about the political arguments, the
Hmm.
two sides. I see that as like think of the old magnets where you had the blue and red side, little rectangle. Now that's a little thing stuck on what would be an entire table in size comparison of potential ideas.
Yeah.
But these are the only things that are acceptable to be said.
Yeah, and even if
Anything outside that is just, oh, you can't talk about that
yeah,
kind of
even
thing.
if something is sort of on the other side of the political fence to you, it's still within the realm of sort of standard responses. It's still acceptable to say it, even if
Mm,
that then results in a shouting match. It's like it's within the realm of acceptable dialogue. But then there's the things that are so far outside it that I haven't had this, but I've heard about it, that you'll say it and then people mentally edit it to understand it, and then it comes out as something within the acceptable range, and that's what they think you're
yeah,
saying.
or they're shocked,
Mm. And then
which
there's,
is perhaps what I like doing. Maybe that's where my instinct is. I like breaking that Overton window.
I wonder if it's because your comfort level of chaos is higher than average.
I imagine it is
Mm.
quite intellectually.
Mm.
I'm, I'm not a big fan of chaos in my personal life.
Yeah, yeah, like I want good financial order in my life. Like that is a big thing for me. But intellectual
Yeah.
chaos, yeah.
Well, you could say that you have all these savings and stuff, and you're far better with money than I am. But your job is not the most stable in the world. Like you're in a startup.
Yeah, I have backups in the sense of if this failed, I can. They're always wanting TAs at uni. I could get a job as a TA there again, and I am
Well, and you
living
got the
on.
government stipend.
Yeah, yeah, I'm living on as much now as I would be getting without the job.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Suppose I'm doing something similar. My wife gets money for having children. Cool. And my form of that is simply to have a stable job,
Hmm.
even if I spend all the money and have nothing left. I know that I'll get a paycheck next week and every week for the next year because I'm not losing my job.
Hmm.
That's enough for me. Maybe I am more comfortable on the edge of chaos because I've always been like 1 foot off the cliff my whole life. Not just money wise, but everything that I've done. And it doesn't stress me.
Hmm.
Sometimes I wish it would because then I'd prepare more for the future, but doesn't seem to,
Hmm.
which is interesting.
Yeah, though I do like having things planned out in a sense of like here's the scoped out chaos. It's not just raw chaos of let's start walking till we find somewhere to eat. It's like, well, I know there are three places to eat in the area.
You have to know the potential branches.
Mm.
Like I know that any one of 12 things could happen in terms of my living or financial situation, and I've already formulated responses to all of those.
Mm.
And that doesn't make me uncomfortable because I can think through that and it doesn't take long. I really am curious about this because I've met very few people that are very few. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone, but I imagine we're rare who revel in this what expectation defying thing.
Mm. Because yeah, it's like for most people, I think they pick an opinion almost as a effort saving exercise of new social issue. What's the one that aligns most with previous thoughts or is followed by the people I follow. It's like, oh, okay, I'll pick that one. I believe this. And it's like, yeah, you didn't know that 2 seconds ago. You just formed that
Yeah.
opinion. Where while I might hold opinions and they might be quite entrenched, I think of it like if you have a set of scales, or no, a seesaw. You can put weights at different distances from the center, and so the further out from the center it is, the more certain it is. And you can have things like the Earth is round, it's like big solid weight all on one side. You can have things where it's a solid weight on either side, like that's probably 50% out, like the gun control arguments, and that there's enough arguments from either side that appear possibly fallacious, that I'm like, okay, I don't have a strong personal opinion on it, because I lean toward the slightly toward the guns seem better to have in a society than not, but I know they cause harms in the short term, but in the long term, it seems like a better thing to have them in the society. Da, da, da. So that's one where I've got evidence sort of distributed on both sides, where there's a fair bit of evidence on it. But then there's other things where the weight's all on one side, but it's only like one coin on the end of the seesaw weighing it down. It's like that's solid evidence, but it's not much of it. So wouldn't take a large amount of actual evidence to shift it the other way. And so all my opinions and attitudes are sort of like that. So if you,
Okay. I
yeah,
got a question.
yep,
In your analogy,
hmm,
we'll take the Earth is round thing as the example, just because it's funny.
hmm.
Um, four things in that category of which you are effectively certain. Do you entertain the other side?
I met someone once who he was, how do I put it? He was someone who didn't believe things that he couldn't prove himself, in a sort of honest skeptic way. And he'd, after I'd spent the day at his house, and he said that he didn't believe the earth was round. And so it's like, well, how would you prove it then? And so I had to think about that and entertain the other side, as in, it's possible that I'm wrong. I guess so, but I'm not going to go out and seek the evidence that I'm wrong on every subject. Generally, I just let the evidence sit there. But if I'm confronted with someone who sort of demands a coherent point, or um, has solid points the other way, I'll entertain it, I guess is the right phrase for it. So I went through okay, what evidence do we see with our own eyes, and what possible ways could it work if the
Hmm.
Earth was flat, and how could we test those theories? And basically,
Okay.
based on the motion of, yep,
Can I change that question slightly?
yep,
Take it away from that specific example and take it away from a thing that you know to be certain and change it to a thing that society knows to be certain. Our human society knows a thing to be certain. Do you feel any call to investigate the opposite of said claim?
not from a contrarian perspective, as in I don't revel in the opposing the standard view, but I do love a chase of a thread or a crack in what's there. Like,
Mm. If you notice something.
or I see something pointed out that this doesn't make sense, like the effects of electrical currents and magnetic fields on a stellar or galactic scale. It's like I saw a talk on the electric universe, and it's like, okay, we have gravity, that explains a lot. But the assumption is that it explains everything. And as the talk went on to point out that plasma is actually quite conductive, and magnetic fields are quite a few orders of magnitude stronger than gravitational fields. Just pick up iron filings with a magnet, and so on. And there are like there are things that don't make sense without it, like galaxies and stars forming in lines along filaments of plasma that almost look like they're conducting um, currents and have a magnetic field, and these galaxies that form along this filament will all be sort of parallel, stacked like dinner plates, spaced apart at galactic distances, of course, but they've seen examples of this. That, and same for, no, I don't think they've done the same with solar systems, because I can't see the plane of their motion as easily, but like there's electric currents that flow into and out of the sun and so on, and it's like, well, it makes sense that these would have effects. What are those effects? And like, I love those, the what you thought to be true is more interesting than it was. So it's like you thought it was true, but here's a crack. Here's a bit where it doesn't make sense. And if I chase down the crack and it's all the crack ends because there's just more that I didn't understand or something like that, then okay. But if I go into it more and then we get into the metaphysics and the views of the world that opens up and all very interesting. Does that answer your question?
Hmm. Sort of. I don't. I think that you are a little bit that way, but I think not quite as much as
Mm.
me.
Yes, I'm not contrarian to the same degree that you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for example, in the recent years with the COVID situation,
Mm.
the second that started happening, the second it started showing up on the news and people started talking to it, I like went straight for all the opposing information
Mm.
and consumed that at a far greater rate than I did any of the affirming information. And I tend to do that with most things in the world.
Mm.
If it's an established thing that the culture or the society believes, I want to read the arguments from people who disagree with that.
Mm. So in terms of the devil's advocate position, you're almost his attorney.
I do my best, yeah, because I don't need to know all the reasons why what we're doing now is good, because we're already fucking doing it.
Mm.
But if it's wrong, I need to know, because then I can protect myself from it or be more informed.
Mm.
I think that's just a guess. I'm sort of, post hoc reasoning, but you get the idea. There's got to be a reason why I do that, and I think that might be it.
Mm.
So if the whole culture already believes a thing, then for me to really understand why it is that we do what we do now and why it works and why that's great, it feels a bit shilly. I don't know. Maybe I think in a different age I would have been very, very liberal happy.
Mm. Yeah, when
You
that
know,
was the
opposing the
rebellion.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas now everything now all of our governments are leftist, progressive. And I've grown up that way my whole life, regardless of which political party. So the biggest rebellion I could do in my generation was get married and have children and be right leaning because
Mm.
that's the opposing thing. That's the underground for my generation.
It's going to be really interesting to look back on the present in 10 or 20 years. It's going to be a sort of, what the hell was that
Yeah,
period?
yeah, they're pushing that pendulum pretty hard.
Mm. There was a,
And because I was in the time when the pendulum was being pushed and currently held aloft, I'm sort of really looking forward to a swing back the other way.
mm,
Dramatic as possible.
there was a comment I saw um, on a article recently. It was the article I sent you actually about masculinism.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if you had time to read it, but to summarize it, he was pointing out the similarity between now and the period that saw the rise of feminism and saying that at that time, with the rise of suburbia, it had cut off the social networks of women who were housewives, which we're talking about a different era, different social norms, and so on, and they've been changing so much. I'm just going to talk about it as it was then, not passing moral judgments on it. But
Uh,
then the vast majority of women were stay at home mothers, and they had their social networks of friends and little organizations and so on. They had their own culture in a sense. Every subgroup of society has their own subculture, and the female subculture, as it existed then, was heavily disrupted by the rise of suburbia, where instead of little communities, it was you live in this house, in this suburb, and you don't know anyone anywhere nearby. And all you have to do every day is cook and clean and care for the children and go start raving mad because of social isolation. And he described it, so the guy who wrote this article described it as the way women were living being dictated by men, which didn't work. And then you saw the rise of feminism as a backlash against that, and you had, what was it, the Cosmo girl, as I think he described it, women who would use sex to manipulate men. You had the rise of women's rights, which were shouted down with great gnashing of teeth in um, the media of the day. You had the burn the bras movements and so on. The bumper stickers of a woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle. Like, we don't need them. So on. And now the pendulum swung back the other way to the extent that we're seeing men's rights movements pop up. We're seeing men, the generalization, of course, and so on, but we're seeing men, the way men live being defined by women, which doesn't work either.
Mm.
And we're seeing men being praised for being feminine and women being praised for being masculine, which is just a bit crazy, but we're likely to see a similar backlash in the form of, say, masculinism as we saw in the form of feminism back then.
Well, it's
And
already happening.
exactly. And the more it's decried in the media, the more it makes people think, oh, I might check that out.
Yeah, because it feels like a cause worth fighting for.
Mm,
I think it's also worth noting that even on the women front, the pendulum's going back the other way.
mm.
That a large amount of women are voluntarily going, I want to go back to the way things were before the big swing.
Yeah, and even the people who are supposedly being campaigned for, like the comment below this article was by someone who was trans before it was cool. Like they were just living their life their way, and they have watched what has been happening with trans activists with horror. And at the end
Mm.
of their long comment, they said, get down on your knees and pray that the woke people don't take up your cause because they will destroy it. And this person, I don't know what their gender was or whatever, but they were talking about how go back 10, 15, 20 years, and there were all sorts of accusations of trans people being rapists who just wanted to get an excuse to get into the opposite gender bathroom and yada yada yada. And now those accusations carry a great deal more weight when you have people claiming
Yeah,
to be
there's some
women in order
basis
to,
to it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, getting into women's prisons, and then you get the women pregnant in the women's prisons because those people were racist, were rapists out in society. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, diversity.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like,
Where do you
yeah,
see this going from
backlash.
here?
The timeline, such as it is, that comes to mind is lots of shouting, carrying on as usual, and something I've seen proposed, which is the best explanation or the best timeline I've got, is that some people will come to their senses. Not in the sense of, oh no, I've been so wrong, I must make amends, but in the sense of a niggling feeling that something ain't right, and then a gradual realization that, oh, that feels bad when I think about those things that were said and the things I did, and then just going quiet and wanting everyone to forget about it in a piecemeal and gradual sense. And a few will just dramatically change sides, as we've already seen happen, but there are going to be a lot of people who won't let things go quietly. And like, look at all the women who, since the rise of feminism, have ridden that to air their grievances, which in many cases are entirely justified, of exploitation and discrimination for no useful purpose. And that's a hot button issue and is a hell of a lot more complicated and deserves a whole lot more attention, but I'm going to ignore all that for now. Um,
I
but
wonder if it's going to get violent.
Oh, it will get violent in pockets. It will get violent in
Because
pockets.
I'm thinking about using the feminist evolution
Hmm.
as a map for this. They got their voices heard and they got their point across using reputation destruction.
Because that's the feminine typical mechanism
The
of displaying aggression.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I wonder if this keeps getting pushed. Part of me is terribly afraid that they'll win and they'll emasculate all the men and all of this, but it's not going to happen because the subconscious doesn't really allow that. Right, that joke Peterson always makes about during all this feminist stuff, the fastest selling book of all time was 50 Shades of Grey.
Hmm.
Because, subconscious does what subconscious does. It's clear that a large amount of people are on their own individually changing themselves. A lot of men are really seeking how to develop themselves in literature and reading and online.
Hmm.
A lot of that's being led astray, which is a shame, but
And then you've got the red pill stuff.
that's also good. The leading astray, I'm more thinking of like the Andrew Tate type of people.
Oh,
I
that's what
don't
I was
like them.
talking about as red pill.
Ah, oh, that's kind of sad. Um,
The pickup artists who use manipulation to get sex, like the woman.
yeah, red pill was a political term from a
Okay,
long time ago, and it was a very good thing. Uh, that aside,
okay.
I wonder if things go far enough that men will start standing up and making their voices known in public in a political way. And I wonder if that can be peaceful.
Hmm. I think there's definitely the potential for it to happen peacefully, but the potential for it to happen violently is, as I sense you fear, much greater than in the feminist movement.
I'm not sure I fear it, but part of me really likes that idea. But
Hmm.
our movement in that direction would be good. Like with the feminist stuff, they weren't cracked down on by the government, not in legitimate ways. They had their protests, and they were generally allowed, and that's swayed public opinion over time, and laws changed. I imagine if men's rights activists started doing protest in the street to bring back traditional families and protect masculinity and femininity. I imagine the government might crack down on that, given the
Responding,
political situation we are.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I think about the protests that we organised with the lockdown stuff or the vax, no vax mandates in this country in terms of, what buildings you can go into and stuff. Um, the protests were entertained for like 3 days, and then the government came out in force and, police batons and tear gas and cleared the protests.
mm,
And the protesters didn't back down and run away. And I could see that happening very easily if whatever you want to call them, the what masculinists, as you were saying.
I think it's a good descriptor.
Yeah, it's a good mirror to the feminists. It
Mm,
doesn't have the same ring to it, but I can see it. Men's rights activists is somewhat good, but I could see it getting bad very quickly. We're heavily towards tyranny, largely due to the feminist movement at the moment, and an anti feminist movement would not be tolerated in our political climate. But if we're at the point where anti feminist people are in the streets, I don't think they're going to back down if the riot squad rolls up.
mm.
And that could be very, very messy and get out of hand very fast.
And we can see how it would be portrayed in the media, the legacy
Yeah.
media.
Yeah, I really
Mm.
wonder. People seem to think that everything's so secure and stable.
Oh
And the
gosh.
left has sort of been ranting and raving about their fears of right-wing takeover for a long time. And all the right-wing people are like, "Yeah, right. Like, we're gonna do that. Like, it's even possible." And I think in the West, we've sort of forgotten how easy coups are.
Mm.
Like, I'm reading, I've mentioned it before, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. And it's just like assassination after assassination, changing of the guard, military making deals with certain politicians to raise them to the rank of emperor. Just one after another, after another, after another for thousands of years.
Mm. Yeah, in less stable states these days, we still see it.
Yeah, and I don't think it's like we very easily could have had that with Trump.
Mm.
He was in the position that if he wanted to, during that election, he could have crossed the Rubicon and made a change. Um, Part of me wishes he did. I suppose that's another one of those statements that makes people not happy. But people, the left screams about this, about the right wing Nazis are coming for us. They're going to come for us. They're going to take power and then we're going to be screwed. Maybe they have a point.
A
Maybe,
self-fulfilling prophecy?
well, yes, yes. But also their fears aren't unjustified. Perhaps their subconscious can tell, like, we're pushing things pretty hard and we continue to push things pretty hard. And, eventually someone's going to push back.
Well, in a large sense, the people who are acting most like Nazis are the people who shout about Nazis all the time. And what
Yeah.
was it? What you contemplate, you imitate.
Yeah, but you also got to think is that once people stand up and go, okay, I've had enough of the Nazis now, like the big
Hmm.
famous war everyone talks about, we weren't nice to them.
Hmm.
And, you can't just beat down a population into submission forever.
Hmm.
They keep ranting and raving about how much they fear white people dominating other people. You keep putting down an entire race of people forever and demeaning them
Doing the exact
and
thing they
going,
claim to hate.
you are trash, you are less than everyone else, you deserve to die, you need to go and die and not have kids. You think that they're just going to take it?
Hmm.
You know, if you want your white Nazis to go back and take over power of government and start implementing their Nazi policies, what you really want to do is exactly what they're doing. You're just goading them at this point.
Back them into a corner where they've got no option and don't allow dialogue of person to person, human to human discussing opposing ideas so you can actually see the other person has a point even if you disagree with it.
Yeah, it's quite funny. I used to see memes out of people like this because they have actually sort of kept tabs on those communities for a long time just to see what they're up to. Um, and also partially the enjoying being a part of communities that are outside the Overton window. Um, but there's a lot of memes that come out of those things, which is like some image of a big war, which is like the peace, and then all the evil Nazis are behind them, and the only thing stopping them coming out is like their jobs and families.
Hmm.
That's always been the meme. It's like the big dam protecting the flood of all the death squads or whatever they're scared of is their jobs and families. And then you have the image of, whatever leftists with a hammer. Like, let's just destroy their jobs and families. Oh no, I'm being attacked.
Hmm.
I think self fulfilling prophecy is the way to go. Like, obviously, that wouldn't be a good thing.
Hmm.
And I don't even think that people that are inclined that way necessarily want it. But you can't push forever and not be pushed back. And I don't want to see our society get violent. But the way
Hmm.
we're going, people keep pushing. One day,
It's
someone's going to
interesting
push back
on
and the shot
the
will be heard.
Oh yeah, it's like there'll be 1,000 shots that aren't heard or only shouted about, and then there'll be one at
Yeah,
just the wrong moment. The Archduke Ferdinand of World War Three will be shot, and I don't think it'll be a World War Three, but there'll be
I think it'll be a global civil war. I think
with a
almost
thousand
every Western
sides.
nation is going to have devolve into pure civil war and territorial factioning. We're going to fraction because we've got too big.
Hmm.
We're united under what?
The
What are we
mighty
united
dollar.
under? Yeah, the petrodollar, which is about to collapse.
Hmm. And I've
We don't
seen.
believe in God anymore. We're not united by nation or national pride anymore. We're not even united by ethnicity anymore because we don't even know what it is to be our own race. You know, we don't have a cultural identity of Europeans. No one reads Plato. We've got nothing.
Hmm.
So all that we have is whatever our political beliefs are, and then there's nothing that we have that makes us believe in not being violent with each other to assert those beliefs.
I
So
can't
it's
help but
just a ticking time bomb.
I can't help feeling that rather than one great conflagration of two opposing sides going at each other, such as World War Two, it'll be 1,000 little squabbles, each catastrophic in its own area, but 100 different civil wars.
Yeah, there'll be no unifying anything to any of it
Hmm.
because there's no unifying narrative.
This feels
There's
like
no
how
unifying
civilizations
story.
fall.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I think it's because we all lost faith in God. But beside the point, there's what are the conservatives going to unite around? What? They don't agree. Even the liberals don't agree with each other. You're going to have 50 different factions, and each faction all fighting for their place on top.
Hmm.
And you take away divine right, all you get is power, the will to power. And anyone can aspire to that.
Hmm. And that's what so many of them claim is the ultimate truth.
And everyone will. Nothing's true except power. It's like, well, you know what you're going to get? You're going to get a state of anarchy and bloodbath, and you'll be ruled by the most meanest and severe warlord.
Hmm.
And that's really where we're heading.
Elements of this. Oh, two parallel conversation lines there, but remind me warlords. But the I've been thinking as you've been saying this that the emasculization of our society at large feels very much for me personally mirrored by my own journey in the sense of firstly not really developing boundaries as a naive homeschooler having his first girlfriend and ending up marrying her, and it turned out that was a toxic relationship and so on. But the not emasculized sounds like it was removed. I hadn't developed it. But then that's what I've been
Mm.
working to develop. Like, okay, what is a healthy boundary? When do I say no? What would I say? This is a course of
So
action that would make me leave.
sounds like this the story of our generation. We weren't
Yeah.
taught it as children. We didn't have anyone to imitate it from as children. And we've had to figure it out ourselves as we get older. Which is, by the way, why I think the pendulum has started to swing back the other way.
Hmm.
I see a lot of men who are standing up and trying to get better, starting to do combat sports, starting to exercise and eat well, not being, laptop class, skinny slobs,
That sounds
warlords.
like that generation will be a force to be reckoned with as it builds over several generations, so to speak. But that current.
Yeah, it's a good direction. This
Hmm.
pendulum swing back the other way is going to be beautiful. I can't wait.
Painful for some. But yeah. Warlords, that something. Oh, as you get through the collapse of Rome, it'll be interesting to see if this is mirrored in that description of it, but I've heard that in the decline of a civilization, the reason you get warlords isn't because those warlords are brutish enough to take over and beat everyone else into submission. It's because they kick out the oppressive aristocracy who are oppressive by taxes and just the sheer weight of bureaucracy, and they they are a warlord, but their life's better under them than it was under the bureaucracy, so people don't bring back the bureaucracy. Where previously
Yeah.
everyone knew that
In
chaos would be worse than the order, then they finally get to the point of screw it, a little more chaos and a lot less order would be better, so I can just do the
well,
thing.
on that topic, this comes back to there is not really any difference between a warlord, a gang, a mafia, or a government. So
Mm,
in the situation you're talking about, government has become over corrupt and burdensome. Warlord develops somewhere. He's just a usurper in the history.
mm,
And there's, hundreds and hundreds of these accounts. Things go too far wrong, and one person stands up and marshals an army, becomes a warlord over a province, is elected by the people there, most often,
mm.
accepted, and then he marches to the capital, kills, and takes over. And now he's the legitimate governor.
Yeah. He just had
Um,
to get in
yeah,
by a slightly more violent route than the ballot box, even though, well, his ballot box was still from the people, because if the people didn't support you, you'd pretty soon find someone else lining up to do this, to do it with the people's support. Of
yeah,
course, if there's multiple different factions of people equally giving support, then stuff gets messy.
yeah. The support of the people at large is mostly irrelevant because they'll support whoever feeds them and doesn't kill them.
Hmm.
It's the support of the inner parties. At least it was in Rome, and I think it is today. I'll leave that aside. It was the support of the Praetorian Guards and the Senate. And the
Hmm.
Senate sort of became irrelevant pretty quickly. Um, because I'm reading about the fall of it, where it was no longer a republic.
Hmm.
It was the army that mattered, not really anything else. Things are different now, but I wonder how.
Yeah, like the biggest difference now in terms of warlordism is one guy on the next hill with a hunting rifle and a good eye can take out the leader, where you'd you'd have a warrior class who spent their life training in their martial skill so that they could fight and survive, and a guy
Oh,
in a suit of armor with a sword could beat any peasant. But now, if the peasant gets a lucky shot, the soldier who's trained for most of his life is dead.
yeah, guerrilla warfare wins now.
Yeah.
Actually, at one back then, there was a particular nation on the borders that engaged in guerrilla warfare and eluded them. I was more meaning in terms of political transfer here,
Mm.
hence the media being effectively the scribes to the king,
Mm.
hence all of their attacks on, legitimate challenges to the status quo.
Yeah. And challenge doesn't mean of the same ideology. Challenge means someone following the due process to get elected and then being elected. It's like that's a solid and due process. And just because you happen to disagree with this ideology and so on does not mean that he
Yeah,
is
but
wrong in any
those
way.
those who run the state don't care. They don't believe it's a democracy,
Yeah.
and it's not,
They think
clearly.
they think the
Like just
plebs
the
are
last few years, looking at America, it's like clearly that is not a democracy, pretending to be one.
Mm.
I know it's a republic. Yeah, yeah, I get it. It's not that either. You know what I'd say? I'd say that in terms of the transfer, America is not a constitutional republic anymore.
Because the Constitution's ignored.
Yeah, it's an empire now.
I think it's been an empire for a while.
Yes, yes, it has. But I think we had sort of a moment to attest to see whether or not it could be restored, and it's clear that it's not going to be. So we're now in the decline and fall of the United States. Monday, maybe I'll have a 8-volume folio series book on that on my shelf.
Yeah.
Maybe, but it's yeah. Now that I think about it, it really lines up with what I've read so far in the book of how the transfer of power shifted from the constitutional republic of Rome to the empire, and how it just continually degraded over time.
Mm. Um,
Woodrow Wilson.
Sorry, I was just going to talk about a bunch of books that are just set at different points in the decline of it. There's non-fiction and fiction. John Michael Greer's the author, if anyone's interested, but he's written sort of reasonably extensively on how civilizations decline and empires decline, and he's looking at the US and thinking, yep, yep, there's the signs, tick, 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 and the next one should be coming along probably in this area soon. It's in this sort of economic type area rather than a geographical area. But
Mm.
um,
I still disagree with your assertion that societies collapse due to a lack of resources.
yeah, I've my seesaw of opinion on that topic has swung towards the margin of error in the middle, leaning, well, I think both are influencing factors.
Perhaps it's something to flesh out next time,
Hmm.
seeing as your opinion's changed on that.
And I think that when you say society, I think we had slightly different preconceived structures behind it, which,
Mm. Sounds like a good topic to revisit then.
yeah. But in the sense, we'd still agree, I think, that our current society is not on a path not on a path with a long future.
No,
Yeah.
no, I think, yeah, this society does not have a long future. I think it's
Mm,
about to shift and morph into something else. At least I'm hoping.
mm,
God, I'm hoping. Um, that may have some more longevity to it. You know, I've been thinking about this show that we're doing the
mm.
last few days, and I think the name we picked of Campfire Philosophy you picked is a really good one. Precisely because I don't know what this show is.
Mm.
Like I don't know what it we I don't know what we're trying to do. I don't think we're trying to do anything.
Oh God, I'm just getting the image of someone in 500 years uncovering a record of these conversations, and because of some piece of surviving technology or because it was recorded somehow that they could decode, or even if it was transcribed, reading it and getting an insight. Oh God, that'd be a hell of a weird insight into our present.
Hmm. A story. Yeah. Time capsule for the ages. A wee bit
Yeah,
of
I doubt it's
history,
going to
eh?
be that, but it's a fun idea.
Well, it depends on what you think the internet's going to be.
Hmm.
Because I got a pretty strong feeling that at this point, whatever's here is staying. So the fact that we're doing this, someone could be listening to this 50,000 years in the future. Sitting in a library, whatever libraries look like 50,000 years in the future, combing back on the history of mankind and uncovering odd gems.
Mm. One of the things that's a staple of many sci-fi stories, and I'm using sci-fi to refer to more than just humans in rubber suits in space. Like the broader sense before rockets and space travel took over. H.G. Wells, for example.
Mm.
But some form of resilient information store. It's like, here, this item can be dropped, thrown, boiled, and so on, and then you can pull the data out afterwards. It's all still there, and there's been a few things along those lines, like storing binary information by making bubbles in glass at different depths with a laser, and depending on how you focus it, you can draw the information out again, or
I heard something about
mm,
crystals having ridiculous amounts of information storage possibility.
mm, or genetics.
That's another one. I don't know. That's slightly terrifying to me. The whole gene editing thing freaks me out.
Or if you can um, store a compendium of knowledge in a
Hmm.
thousand different species, then that's one
You
way to
know,
get it through to the future in fragments.
seeing as I mentioned gene editing, why don't we talk about something terrifying that happened recently?
Oh, hit me.
Well, okay, we have to shoot off soon, but I've just been thinking about this recently, and it sort of struck me with the COVID situation, and once everyone,
Mm,
finally accepted that it really was a lab leak. Effectively, every human being on the planet has been infected with a genetically engineered virus for the first time.
mm.
Maybe there's some theories about particular other diseases, but all human beings forever now contain within them genetic code of a non natural origin. That's not going away for the rest of time. And we did it.
Not all viruses that infect people end up getting into the junk DNA of our cells, but there will probably be some people with it in there.
Well, antibody responses to it will stay around. It'll keep being retransmitted forever,
Mm,
like the common cold that carries with us. We'll carry that DNA in our DNA, but we sure as shit carry parts of it
mm,
in us.
mm.
Um, Even more for those who got the vaccine. It terrifies me to imagine how much of the human race has been biologically influenced by rushed scientists, rushed, not careful, and potentially malevolent.
I doubt it will be the last.
No, no, I agree. That's even worse, but it's like a bridge that we've crossed now.
I would
We
argue
can't we
that
can't go back over this line.
the same is true, possibly arguably more so, of various chemicals like DDT that are very hard to break down and bioaccumulate, and
The forever
microplastics and things like
chemicals.
that. Yeah, I think they'll gradually
Yeah,
fade out, but they're gonna stick
I
around
feel
for many
I agree. I'm
lifetimes.
terrified of the microplastics and the forever chemicals.
Mm,
But I feel like there's something different with this because we introduce something alive, a non natural life form,
mm.
which is this virus, and then it's meshed with us and evolved.
I don't think its potentials are that different from a natural virus. It's like we've had some pretty bad natural viruses.
I'm I'm not saying it in terms of this is we're all going to die catastrophe. I just mean in terms of
Hmm.
literally what we have done is profound in a way that we can't undo.
Hmm. It's
Just
definitely
to know that this is what we've done and that we carry it in us now, and we will going forward.
the bit that
It's
strikes
like
me.
it's like a nuclear bomb detonation. That's how it feels
Hmm.
like to me.
Yeah, like the first one, and
Yeah,
then
like
that.
a oh, what have we done?
Hmm.
Biological weapon.
I guess the bit that strikes me most about it is that it seems like it hit at the peak. Depending on how you define it, the peak of our civilization was in the 70s, but
Mm,
depending on how you define it, there are
yeah,
many
yeah. I
definitions.
think every person's going to have a different answer to that question.
Yeah, but it feels to me like the peak COVID hitting was at the peak. It's like miles of air travel per year. I suspect we'll never reach that again. The
No,
2019 peak.
a lot of that's on purpose though. Like the ESG scores and
Hmm.
you know Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. They're doing their best to make sure that you don't fly or do anything really. So I don't think that that's a natural decline or a planned one.
All these people trying to take things down in subtle and not so subtle ways. It's like people only do things as long as, well, in some cases they keep doing it till they've got no option, but people won't just sit around and do what they're told. People are very contrarian in many
Uh,
ways, and
it has happened before. I mean, totalitarian societies,
mm,
people will just falsify themselves to get along and say the party line. And it's clear that that's the goal. And I think they're accelerating as fast as they can towards that because they're aware that the public is now aware of their goal,
mm,
which is to put all of the world under the dominion of a single centralized authority of which they control.
mm,
And I think they're being rushed and hasty about it now because we're starting to rebel.
my feeling is that it'll flop.
I hope so.
Mm,
I really do.
because
I think you're right though,
mm,
but it's still terrifying.
yeah, I don't have a good way of describing this, but it feels like they're swimming against the current. I'm not saying that the current is going in a particular other direction as such. It's like the current is getting turbulent, but like when the current of a culture, idea that you have to have a unified culture in order for it to have a current going in any one direction, so that's a mark against this nefarious scheme succeeding. But we think of pre-World War II Germany, there were strong social currents going in a particular direction which were seized on and amplified by certain individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they both rode and drove that, but if the current wasn't there, they couldn't have done it in the first place.
Well, that makes me think of the COVID scenario.
Like manufacturing a
That
current.
was that was no, like that was their moment.
Mm,
If they were going to seize domination of the planet, that was their chance.
mm,
And it failed. They were pushed back on hard enough by enough people that their plans fell apart.
mm. And
But
they
the
were inept
people
enough. It's like they
were pretty skilled at
overestimate.
what they did.
In some ways, yeah, but in other ways, no. I'm just thinking of the Joe Rogan horse dewormer incident where like he's doesn't he have more viewers than CNN, and CNN were there trying to discredit him, and he was there
Quite a
pointing at
lot.
what they did and laughing.
I'm amazed they haven't killed him yet.
Uh,
They know they can't because they know that everyone would go, no way. He was assassinated.
yeah, yeah, they can't Epstein him.
No, no. Epstein, the fact that everyone knows that Epstein didn't kill himself is like the greatest gift to humanity because they realize, like, oh, we can't just black hole people anymore. They're finally waking up to the fact that the internet's in charge.
Yeah, and oh, how long's it gonna be till the full Epstein client list gets some publicity and like his co-conspirators in jail for stuff? It's like, okay, on what evidence? And so on, and oh, that's gonna
Well,
be a pretty
we
day
already
when the
know
fireworks come
a
out for
fair
that.
few. We already know a fair few of them, and nothing's happened to them.
That's true.
You know, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, just Harvey Weinstein, you know, they're still walking free.
Yeah,
I don't know if
but
Harvey Weinstein's walking free. I assume so. He's rich.
yeah, but,
Almost
um,
done a fighting.
yeah, comeuppance for them might be a bit too much to hope for, but the
Like, I can tell you this.
mm,
There will come a day where those who have skirted the law and gotten away with never being punished for their crimes because they are connected to power, there will be a day where they get punished for their crimes.
mm,
History always does it. Yeah, it may be 50 years. I don't know. But there'll come a day where people in those positions get got, and they get got by the people.
sorry.
This always happens,
Mm,
and I think it's somewhat comforting.
yeah, I try and take some
Anyway,
solace in the idea of reincarnation, but
hmm,
that's not a this is what I believe. It's a this is my best explanation. So it's like it's a not quite grasping at straws for things for people getting their comeuppance, but it's a ah well, that's my last bet.
I wonder what. Yeah, we should have another metaphysical conversation next time. We need to wrap this up and go off and do our personalized things now. But I think
Yes.
perhaps we can lean back into metaphysics next time because I've got some questions and I'm trying to figure out where it is that I believe, what it is I believe, because I feel a large part of me is still atheist.
Mm,
So I feel a calling to other things. And then the polytheist part of me is struggling due to, listening to Peterson and going, no, shit, can't accept that.
I've got a book on the way that you might like to borrow sometime.
No, I won't. I don't borrow.
Well, I'll send you the link to it then.
Okay, that's better.
It's the
I'll put
first
it on the list.
it's the first book on the theology of polytheism in about 1500 years.
Ah, the house divided cannot stand. You should
Yep.
look at, I know it's behind the paywall, but you should look at the Exodus series from Peterson. He made a comment recently too that really annoyed me. He was talking about Buddhist philosophy and these multiple layers of. It wasn't actually him; it was someone else talking about slavery. I think when you have a hierarchy of gods, then it is natural to assume a hierarchy of people. Hmm. I Yeah, everything in this topic is fuzzy for me at the
Hmm.
moment, which is why I think we should do it in the next chat, because it's all over the place and I don't have anything particular, so I need to find my way of walking through it. But I can tell you that I intend to walk through it towards monotheism, because I see that as the solution. But I've just got to work out my things, which is going to be interesting,
Yes,
especially for you if you're going to be helpful and not, you know, pushing your particular beliefs on me.
I think I can do that.
Well, let's see. Till next time.
Yep. See you then.
See you then.